Hey everyone, Marine here for lawnfawn. I'm back today with more summer and tropical inspiration. And I'm taking you to a juice bar on the beach and I'm going to show you how I made this shaker blender card. As always, I went through my entire lawnfawn collection to pick up one image here and one image there. So let's see which stamp and die sets I used. Toucan do it for the leaves, flowers and toucan. Happy Summer and Aloha for the watermelon and the pineapple. Sweetest flavor for the cherry. I turned the bubble from bubbles of joy into coconuts. Sweet friends for the strawberries. Baked with love for the words have a sweet. Cheery Christmas for the ampersand. And so smooth for the blender, cocktail, fruits, small umbrella and the word smooth. Next, the simple stripes background portrait die, the Oliver stitched ABCs die set, the smallest die from everyday sentiment banners, the grassy border, the strip die from picket fence, and the largest die from the large stitched rectangle Stackables die set. I also used the tropical leaves background stencils, a paper from the Spiffy Speckles paper pack, and another one from the Watercolor Wishes rainbow paper pack. So here we have all my images already stamped and cut, lots of fruits and tropical things to create my scene. But before coloring everything, I did some changes on the blender and I started by tracing the inside. I did this because I wanted to have edges on the inside of the blender, but you definitely could skip this part and cut on the blender lines directly. I used a black marker to trace all the inside of the blender, and then I cut the middle using my utility knife. So here's my blender with the opening in the middle. Next I used my black marker again to color the inside edges of the opening and this way get a more consistent look. And then I picked up the brightest colors in my alcohol markers to color the blender as well as all the other images. Once all my fruits and tropical images were colored, I moved on to the background and started by creating the back of my juice bar. I cut a 5.5 by 4.25 inches panel out of a green spiffy speckles paper. And to give it more interest, I simply applied a bit of Modellon Distress ink on the edges that I blended towards the center of the panel. And the spiffy speckles papers already have splatter details, but I added a little bit more by mixing the same ink with water and using a small brush. Next, I created a wood planks counter to put the blender and fruits on, and I used the Simple Stripes background portrait die to cut those wood planks. I kept all the pieces together by using washi tape at the back, and then I used Shabby Shutter's Distress ink to add a first layer of color on those planks. Next, with all the elements still attached together at the back, I taped the first tropical leaves background stencil on top of the panel, and I used the Lawn Distress ink to add green leaves to my counter, just as if those leaves had been painted to decorate the bar. I removed the stencil and taped the second one on top, and filled the empty spaces with more green tropical leaves. Removed the stencil, and here we have the wood planks, and I separated all the pieces in order to add more shadows and depth to those pieces. I just applied the Lawn Distress ink again on the edges of each element. And finally, to emphasize the worn-out look I wanted to give to those wood planks, I splattered water drops that I dried using a paper towel. And then I added a mix of Lawn Distress ink with water using my small brush to totally complete my wood planks counter. Next, a simple roof for my juice bar. I cut a rectangle out of paper bag cardstock, and then from that rectangle I cut a grass border. I added a little bit of vintage photo distress ink at the top of that border, as well as a mix of the same ink with water. Next, I created the shaker mechanism. And the first thing I did was to place all the elements and images on my background to get a general idea of the scene, and most of all to know exactly where I wanted the blender to go. So I decided that the blender would go right here, so I held it in place and used a pencil to trace the window section on the green background. I took my utility knife again to cut that window out of my green background. I didn't cut right on the pencil lines, but 1 mm on the outside. I picked up a paper from the Watercolor Wishes Rainbow Paper Pack to create the inside of the blender. I placed my green panel on a card base and slid that pattern paper right behind the green panel, held it in place, and glued it on the card base. Next, I placed the green panel on top again and traced the window on the pattern paper, and I applied 2 layers of foam tape all around the pencil marks, just like so, to form the blender and place my shaker pieces. But before doing this, I needed to close the window, so I cut a small piece of clear acetate that I glued at the back of the green panel. And then, to make sure that my shaker pieces wouldn't stick to the edges of the foam tape, I used my anti-static powder tool and applied powder on the 4 edges of that blender section. Next, I prepared a shaker mix with some beads and sequins, and also strawberry and orange slices. These are made out of polymer clay, very easy to find online or in local craft stores. So I placed those cute tiny pieces in the blender section. I removed all the backing papers and attached the green panel on top to finally complete the shaker mechanism. And next it was time to assemble the different elements on my panel. The tropical leaves wood planks counter first, next the top of the counter and the roof, and then all the fruits and tropical bits and pieces to make my juice bar come to life. Next, I created my sentiment, and I started by cutting the word summer 3 times out of mermaid cardstock. On the top one, I applied a little bit of peacock feathers distress ink. I glued the second and third row together to create dimension. I attached the first row on top, and then stuck the letters on my panel right on the tropical leaves counter. And I totally customized the first part of my sentiment to create my own phrase, have a sweet and smooth. I white heat embossed it on sunflower cardstock and used a banner die to cut it. And I attached it at the top of my panel using foam squares. As always, I added details and highlights on the images using my white gel pen, and that's it, all done. It's time to shake the blender to create a delicious and refreshing juice. And there is plenty of fruits, so everyone gets a glass. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon in the next video. Have a good day. Bye!